Welcome back to the Global Goals Studio. We are joined now by a very special guest whose 2019 book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, was propelled to the top of the New York Times Bestseller list this summer in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, and also because it's a brilliant book. It has remained there ever since. Dr. Ibram X. Kendi is one of America's foremost historians and leading anti-racist scholars. Joining me now to moderate this conversation with Dr. Kendi is Linda Pizzuti Henry, CEO of Boston Globe Media Partners. Linda, over to you.
Thanks, Richard, and welcome, Dr. Kendi, to the Global Goals Studio.
It's great to be with you.
You have really helped to define the idea of anti-racism for society, being opposed to racist policies. What does an anti-racist society look like?
Well, an anti-racist society would be a society where we would not have disparities and inequities between racial groups. There'd be equity, and we would look out at that equity, and we would see normality, because we would view the racial groups, despite any color differences, cultural differences, ethnic differences, equals. And we would essentially institute policies that maintain that equity and certainly bring justice to all people, no matter the color of their skin.
So what does it look like for each of us to be an anti-racist working towards that society?
So in most nations, and certainly in the United States, there are all sorts of racial disparities. So for instance, we're experiencing in the United States that Black and brown people are more likely to be infected and killed from COVID-19. So to be anti-racist is to look at that disparity, not see the cause of it as something being wrong and inferior about Black and brown people, but to figure out the policies and practices behind that disparity and to challenge them and seek to replace them.
We have that sounds beautiful, what you're describing here. We have a global audience, and this is, following in line with what we're discussing at Davos. What are the top 3 anti-racist policies that are needed worldwide?
I would say universal health coverage for every person living, health being a human right, and there are all sorts of racial disparities in health in which people are dying of heart disease and cancer, oftentimes because of racism. Secondly, basic income. So, all the world's peoples would have the ability to not live in poverty. And then thirdly, people all over the world would have not only the ability to vote, but their ability to vote could not be taken away, no matter what. So we'd have people who went automatically sort of able to vote, and therefore we'd be able to really truly have democracies the world over.
These are really, really big ideas, and this is really the right place to be discussing them. And what is the role for research and supporting this movement towards this anti-racist society?
I think research is absolutely critical, and I think that's why we're building this Center for Anti-Racist Research at Boston University, because as I mentioned earlier, you first have to identify racial disparities. You then have to examine and research to figure out the policies behind them. Then you have to innovate the types of policies that can eliminate those disparities. Research is central in all 3 of those steps.
And one of the things that you've taught us is that this movement for anti-racism can start really young. I was complimenting you before on your beautiful book on an anti-racist baby, which has really become, an important part of starting this conversation young and early. How have you been surprised by the reception of your book?
I have, and I've just been incredibly excited to see that reception, because, I think to be able to teach the youngest of children that there's nothing wrong with you or even right about you because of the color of your skin, I think it's truly great for our children to learn earlier or sooner than later.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Dr. Kendi, so much for joining us. You have put forward a lot of really great ideas that we'll be discussing, and we'll be right back in the Global Goals Studio.
Thank you so much, Linda.